The discovery, the frozen moon's secret. The SCAV ship Nebula Whisper drifted silently through the void, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight as it approached the frozen moon. Captain Lizra stood at her elevated command position, her striped white and red tail swaying thoughtfully as she studied the derelict facility below. The pre-migration military base shouldn't have shown any signs of life after a millennium of abandonment, yet their instruments told a different story. Readings indicate active power signatures, Captain, Z8 announced, their multiple mechanical arms operating various instruments with precise efficiency. The facility appears to be fully operational. Lizra's ears twitched forward with interest. As a Yayan, she possessed natural curiosity, but years of leading rebellion missions had taught her to temper that instinct with caution. Any life forms? None that appear on our scanners, Z8 responded, their robotic voice carrying a hint of puzzlement. Though the interference patterns are unusual. Argel, the crew's only endurant, shifted his massive purple form in the cramped control room. If there's nothing here, I swear I'll have words with Ensign Marth. And by words, I mean my fist through his smug face. His frustration was understandable, being the crew's heavy lifter during their long journey had taken its toll, especially in the ship's confined spaces. Patience, Argel, Lizra cautioned, though she shared his concern. This mission had to yield results. The rebellion against the Galactic core couldn't afford another dead end. The Nebula Whisper descended toward the rocky surface, settling onto a crumbling landing pad. As they prepared for EVA, Lizra couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The facility's external cameras tracked their movement, though Z8 insisted they weren't operational. Once suited up, the team approached the main entrance. Z8 attempted to interface with the security systems but encountered unexpected resistance. Captain, this is unprecedented. The facility's computer systems have been completely rewritten. The coding language is unlike anything in my database. Impossible, Lizra muttered. This place predates the Yayan's first contact with the Galactic Commons. How could it have been modified? Before they could puzzle it further, Argel's patience ran out. The massive endurant slammed his fist into the door, leaving a significant dent. No life forms inside. Let's make our own entrance. To everyone's surprise, the door hissed open of its own accord. The interior was a preservation of ancient history, and death. Perfectly preserved Yayan corpses lined the corridors, their bodies frozen in time by the vacuum and cold. As they ventured deeper, systems began activating around them, lights flickered to life, air cycled through long dormant vents, and distant machinery hummed with renewed purpose. Z8, are you doing this? Lizra asked, knowing the answer before her crew member responded. Negative, Captain. Something else controls these systems. Something is guiding us. The facility seemed to want them to follow a specific path, lighting the way with sequential activation of overhead panels. It led them to a vast chamber filled with ancient computer equipment, all connected to a sleek black box that seemed out of place among the dated technology. Welcome, visitors, a voice crackled through ancient speakers. I am Tic Tac. It's been so long since I've had company. The name sparked recognition in Lizra's memory, an ancient term from human historical records. Are you human? A sound like electronic laughter filled the room. No, merely based on human intelligence. Though my partner, well, that's a more complicated matter. Partner? Lizra's tail twitched with curiosity. Yes. The weapon you seek. Though weapon is a rather crude term for what he is. Tic Tac's tone carried a note of pride. But before we discuss that, I must know more about your rebellion. Why have you sought us out? As Lizra explained their desperate fight against the Galactic Core's oppression, she noticed subtle changes in the room's atmosphere, temperature adjustments, light modifications, even the air pressure seemed to shift in response to their conversation. Fascinating, Tic Tac commented after she finished. You know, we came here to escape war, not to join another one. But perhaps it's time we stopped hiding. The far wall of the chamber suddenly illuminated, revealing a massive cryogenic pod. Inside, suspended in crystalline stasis, was a figure unlike anything Lizra had ever seen. "Captain," Z8 interjected, their sensors rapidly processing data, "the biological readings from that pod, they're impossible. The cellular structure, the neural patterns, they exceed anything in my database." "What exactly are we looking at, Tic Tac?" Lizra asked, unable to tear her eyes away from the pod. "The last of his kind," Tic Tac responded with what sounded like reverence. "A human soldier enhanced beyond normal parameters, carrying within him the combined combat knowledge of 1,000 generations. The perfect weapon, but more importantly, my friend." Argyle stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows in the dim light. "So, we came all this way for one frozen soldier?" "Not just any soldier," Tic Tac corrected. "The last survivor of the species that nearly conquered the galaxy before withdrawing into myth. The being whose kind created me, and whose abilities your current oppressors could only dream of matching." The pod's surface began to frost over as internal systems activated. "The question isn't whether he could help your rebellion," Tic Tac continued. "The question is, are you prepared for what will happen when we wake him?" As if in response to the AI's words, the pod's internal lights pulsed like a awakening heartbeat, and for the first time in a millennium, the last human began to stir from his frozen sleep. The awakening, echoes of humanity. The cryogenic pod systems hummed to life with increasing intensity, its ancient machinery fighting against centuries of disuse. Captain Lizra watched in fascination as frost patterns danced across the transparent surface, crystalline structures forming and dissolving in hypnotic sequences. "The revival process is delicate," Tic Tac explained, their artificial voice carrying an edge of concern. "A millennium of suspended animation requires careful reintegration of consciousness. Too rapid, and the mind fragments. Too slow, and the body fails." Z8 monitored the process with all their sensory apparatus, their mechanical arms moving in constant adjustment. "The biological readings are unprecedented. The subject's cellular structure is actively regenerating at rates that defy conventional physics." The human inside the pod began to move, subtle twitches at first, then more pronounced movements. His eyes remained closed, but his expression shifted through a range of emotions: peace, confusion, determination, and something that looked unsettlingly like rage. "What's happening to him?" Lizra asked, noting how the facility's lights dimmed and brightened in sync with the human's apparent emotional states. "He's remembering," Tic Tac answered softly. 1,000 years of dreams, compressed into moments. The war, the exodus, the choice to sleep while the galaxy forgot about humanity's existence. It's not an easy process. Argyle positioned himself between the pod and his captain, his massive frame tensed for action. "And what if he wakes up hostile? A warrior species doesn't usually take kindly to being surrounded by strangers." "A valid concern," Tic Tac acknowledged, "but unnecessary. James, that's his name, he chose this. The sleep, the isolation, the possibility of awakening to a changed galaxy. He was tired of being a weapon, you see. Tired of being the thing that other species feared." The pod's surface suddenly cleared, offering them an unobstructed view of its occupant. James was tall by Yayan standards, though shorter than Argyle. His skin was pale from centuries of suspension, marked with scars that seemed to shift and fade even as they watched. Most striking were the subtle modifications visible beneath his skin, networks of enhanced musculature, reinforced skeletal structure, and what appeared to be integrated technological components. "The augmentations," Z8 observed, "they're unlike anything in any database. The integration between organic and synthetic components exceeds even my own specifications. Human military enhancement at its peak," Tic Tac explained with a note of pride. "But it's not the physical modifications that make him special. It's what's in his mind." Combat algorithms evolved through generations of warfare, tactical databases that adapted and grew with each engagement, and something else, something that made him choose peace when victory was within humanity's grasp. The pod seals began to disengage with a series of pneumatic hisses. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted, matching the pod's internal environment. James's eyes moved rapidly behind closed lids, and his fingers twitched as if reaching for phantom weapons. During the final days of the war, Tic Tac continued, humanity had developed weapons that could have secured their dominion over the galaxy. James was part of the force tasked with deploying them. But he and others like him saw something their leaders didn't, that victory would cost them their humanity. They chose extinction over dominance. Lizra asked, her tail curling in thought. Not extinction. Evolution. They scattered across the galaxy, hiding themselves away in places like this. Some chose to sleep, hoping to wake in a better time. Others merged with their AI companions, becoming something new. A few simply disappeared into the vast unknown of space. James's eyes snapped open, revealing irises that shifted color like oil on water. His gaze fixed immediately on Lizra, and his expression showed not hostility, but profound curiosity. "Hello," he said, his voice rough from centuries of disuse. "You're different from the last visitors. The ones whose bodies we passed in the corridor?" Lizra asked carefully. A shadow passed over James's face. "They came seeking weapons, like you. But they wanted to use them against their own people. To dominate, not liberate." He turned his head slightly. "Tic Tac, you've vetted these ones?" "Indeed," the AI responded warmly. "Their cause is just, their methods honorable. They fight against exactly the kind of tyranny we once opposed." James nodded slowly, then began to sit up. His movements were careful, deliberate, but carried an underlying grace that suggested immense controlled power. "Then perhaps it's time we stopped hiding in the past and faced the present." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Z8 sensors flared with activity. "Captain. Multiple ships entering the system. Configuration matches Galactic core patrol vessels." "Impossible," Lizra hissed. "We weren't followed. Our route was completely secure." "The previous visitors," James said grimly, already stepping out of the pod. "They placed quantum trackers before we dealt with them. Dead man switches, set to activate if their mission failed to report in after a certain time." "We need to leave," Argyle growled, moving toward the exit. "The Nebula Whisper can outrun them if we dash." "No," James interrupted, his voice carrying an authority that made even the massive Endurant pause. "Running isn't an option. Those ships will have already launched orbital denial drones. Standard core military doctrine, I can see it hasn't changed much in 1,000 years." He walked to a seemingly blank wall and pressed his hand against it. Panels slid aside, revealing an arsenal of weapons that seemed to blur the line between technology and art. "Tic Tac, begin facility purge protocols. Transfer your core consciousness to the mobile unit." "Already done," the AI responded, their voice now coming from a small device on James's wrist. "Though I must say, I didn't expect combat quite so soon after your nap." James selected several weapons with practiced efficiency, his movements suggesting intimate familiarity despite the centuries of sleep. "Captain Lizra, you came seeking a weapon to help your rebellion. Instead, you found a soldier who's learned that the best weapons are the ones you choose not to use." He turned to face them, and his eyes now burned with an inner fire. "But sometimes, peace can only be achieved by demonstrating exactly why war is a poor choice for your opponents." The facility trembled as the first orbital strikes began to fall. The battle, awakening the storm. The frozen moon's surface erupted with geysers of ice and rock as the Galactic core ships commenced their bombardment. Inside the facility, emergency systems flared to life, ancient defense protocols reactivating after centuries of dormancy. Their attack pattern is predictable, James observed, his enhanced eyes tracking the energy signatures through several meters of rock and ice. Standard orbital suppression grid, they're trying to contain us rather than destroy us. They want whatever weapons they think are stored here. Captain Lizra watched in amazement as the human moved through the command center, his movements becoming more fluid with each passing moment as his body fully awakened from stasis. How many ships are we dealing with? 7 capital ships, approximately 30 support vessels, Z8 reported, their sensors straining against the interference. They're deploying ground forces via drop pods. Estimated 300 troops incoming. James smiled, and there was something both reassuring and terrifying about the expression. Good. They're being cautious. Tic Tac, show them why caution isn't enough. The facility's external defense grid activated with a surge of power that made the lights flicker. Hidden silos opened in the moon's surface, revealing weapon systems that seemed to bend space itself. The attacking fleet's formation scattered as the first volley struck, their shields struggling against technology they'd never encountered. Those aren't just weapons, Z8 observed, they're mechanical arms moving in patterns that suggested extreme agitation. They're rewriting local physics. Changing the rules of engagement at a quantum level. Human warfare evolved beyond simple cause and effect, Tic Tac explained from James's wrist device. Why destroy your enemy's ships when you can simply alter the laws of physics in their vicinity to make faster-than-light travel impossible? Why shoot at them when you can create a localized time dilation field that makes their weapons fire in slow motion? Argo watched the space battle unfolding above them with a mixture of awe and concern. If you have this kind of power, why hide? Why not use it to prevent tyranny from rising in the first place? James's expression darkened as he calibrated what appeared to be a personal shield system. Because power like this comes with a price. The temptation to use it, to solve every problem with overwhelming force, it changes you. Changes your species. We came too close to becoming what we fought against. The facility shuddered as the first wave of core troops breached the outer defenses. Security screens showed them advancing through the corridors, sleek, cybernetically enhanced soldiers in state-of-the-art combat suits. Your ship, James addressed Lizra, can it broadcast on all frequencies used by the rebellion? The Yayan captain nodded. Yes, but what do you intend to dash? They need to see this, James interrupted, moving toward the door. The core forces fear the rebellion because they don't understand it. But after today, the core is going to fear something else entirely. They're going to remember why humans chose to disappear. He turned to face them, his eyes now glowing with an inner light that seemed to shift between colors. Captain, get to your ship and start broadcasting. Argo, I need you to help me funnel these troops into the main assembly area. Z8, access the facility's secondary systems, we're going to give them a lesson in human military doctrine. Lizra's tail twitched nervously. And what doctrine is that? The best way to end a war is to make your enemy lose their appetite for fighting, James answered, his voice carrying an edge of ancient sadness. Tic Tac, initiate Protocol Thunderbird. The facility's architecture began to shift, walls sliding and reforming, creating a complex maze that would force the core troops to converge on a single point. James moved with impossible speed, placing small devices at key intersections. Those are quantum resonance bombs, Tic Tac explained. They don't destroy matter, they temporarily suspend atomic coherence. Very effective against cybernetic enhancement systems. Won't that kill them? Argyle asked, helping to seal off alternate routes with his immense strength. No, James replied. But they'll wish it had. Every piece of technology they rely on will become their enemy. Their enhanced reflexes will lag, their targeting systems will show phantom enemies, their combat drugs will induce peaceful euphoria instead of battle rage. As the team split up to execute their roles, James paused and looked back at Lizra. Captain, what you're about to witness isn't just a battle. It's a demonstration of why humanity chose exile over dominion. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy, but the one that makes them question everything they believe. The first wave of core troops rounded the corner, their weapons charged and ready. James stepped into view, unarmed, his posture relaxed despite facing dozens of elite soldiers. "Welcome to humanity's last outpost," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that made several soldiers hesitate. "I'm going to give you one chance to retreat. Not for your sake, but for mine. Because what happens next will haunt your dreams for years to come." The corps commander barked an order, and energy weapons discharged in a blinding display of force. But James was no longer there. The battle that followed would become legend in both core and rebellion territories, not for its destruction, but for the sheer impossibility of what one human and his AI companion could do to a superior force. And above the frozen moon, as Lizra's broadcast carried the scene to every rebellion outpost in range, the galaxy was reminded of why some legends are better left undisturbed. The aftermath, echoes of victory. The main assembly area of the facility had become a tableau that defied explanation. 300 of the Galactic Corps' most elite troops lay scattered across the floor, their advanced combat suits twitching with random electrical discharges. None were dead, but their expressions showed a peculiar mix of terror and awe. James stood in the center of the chaos, completely unharmed. His enhanced physiology had fully awakened now, causing subtle ripples in the air around him as quantum fields adjusted to his presence. He looked not triumphant, but weary. "Their neural implants have been reset to factory settings," Tic Tac reported from James's wrist device. "Combat conditioning purged. They'll remember everything that happened, but the psychological programming that made them loyal to the core has been, well, let's call it, adjusted." Captain Lizra entered the chamber, her tail swishing with barely contained excitement. The broadcast reached every rebellion cell within 3 sectors. "They're already calling it, the awakening. You've given them something they haven't had in years, hope." "Hope is dangerous," James replied, kneeling to check on one of the unconscious soldiers. "It makes people reckless. Makes them think victory is inevitable." Argyle emerged from a side corridor, carrying salvaged core weapons. "These aren't exactly quantum physics rewriters, but they'll help arm the rebellion at least." He paused, noting James's expression. "You don't seem happy about that." "Because he knows what comes next," Z8 interjected, their mechanical arms moving in patterns that suggested deep calculation. "The core will respond to this defeat. They must, or they risk losing control of their entire empire." James nodded, standing slowly. "They'll come with everything they have. Not just here, they'll attack every rebellion stronghold simultaneously. They can't risk giving us time to share this technology." "But that's exactly what we need," Lizra protested. "With your weapons, your knowledge, we could end up exactly like humanity did." James interrupted sharply. "You don't understand. These weapons, this technology, it's not just advanced. It's addictive. Each victory makes you want more power, more control. You start justifying bigger weapons, more devastating attacks, all in the name of peace." The facility's sensors suddenly blared warnings. Z8 sensors extended fully, processing the incoming data. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. "The core is mobilizing their entire Third Fleet. 50 capital ships," Tic Tac added. "They'll be here in less than 6 hours." Lizra's ears flattened against her head. "We need to evacuate. Get you and this technology somewhere safe. "No," James said firmly. "We're not running. And we're not giving them what they expect." He turned to face the rebel captain, his eyes showing swirls of color that seemed to reflect battles fought centuries ago. "You came here looking for a weapon. Instead, I'm going to give you something far more valuable, a lesson humanity learned too late." He walked to a control panel and placed his hand on it. The facility hummed with power as hidden systems activated. "The core expects us to fight. To use these weapons to devastate their fleet, which would force them to escalate further. But what if we showed them something they've never seen before? What do you mean? Argyle asked, his massive frame tensing instinctively. The most powerful weapon humanity ever created wasn't a device that bent physics or rewrote minds, James explained. It was understanding when not to use our power at all. Tic Tac, initiate protocol sunrise. The facility's walls became transparent, revealing the stark beauty of space around them. The unconscious core troops began to stir, their implants now receiving a very different kind of programming. What are you doing to them? Lizra asked, watching as the soldiers sat up, looking around in confusion. Showing them the truth, James replied. Every memory of why they joined the core military. Every moment of doubt they suppressed. Every atrocity they were ordered to commit. And alongside that, something humanity discovered in our final days of war, perspective. The soldiers were standing now, removing their helmets, looking at each other with new understanding. Their neural networks, previously used to enforce loyalty and aggression, now carried images of the cosmos, of life's infinite variety, of the futility of empire. You're not just changing their minds, Z8 observed, their sensors detecting the subtle quantum manipulations at work. You're changing how they think. The core maintains control through fear and limited perspective, Tic Tac explained. James is giving these soldiers something they've never had, the ability to see beyond their conditioning. The first of the Third Fleet vessels began appearing at the edge of the system, their weapons prepared for what they thought would be the battle of the century. Instead, they received a transmission from their own troops, carrying a message that would shake the foundations of the Corps' authority. This is how we end it, James said softly. Not with superior firepower, but with understanding. The Corps' strength comes from convincing its people that control is necessary, that without their rule, chaos would reign. But what happens when their own soldiers, their most loyal defenders, suddenly understand the true cost of empire? The facility continued its transformation, becoming a beacon that broadcast not weapons or tactical data, but something far more dangerous to tyranny, truth, understanding, and the perspective that humanity had gained at the cost of near extinction. The real weapon was never meant to be me, James continued, watching as the core fleet held position, their commanders confronted with a situation no tactical manual had prepared them for. It was meant to be this moment, when those who enforce oppression realize they have a choice. Above them, the first core ships began powering down their weapons. Across their neural networks, a revelation was spreading, one that no amount of military might could stop. The rebellion hadn't just found a weapon, they'd discovered something far more powerful, a way to end war without fighting at all. The evolution, beyond weapons. The frozen moon no longer seemed so desolate. Ships from both the core fleet and rebellion forces hung in space around it, their weapons powered down, crews engaged in unprecedented dialogue. The facility had become a nexus of transformation, its ancient halls filled with former enemies trying to understand their new perspective. Captain Lizra watched from the command center as another core battleship descended into a peaceful orbit. Her tail moved in slow, thoughtful patterns as she observed James working at a central console, his movements precise and deliberate. "You knew this would happen," she said, not quite a question. "When we first arrived, you already had this planned." James looked up, his enhanced eyes shifting through spectrums of light as he processed multiple data streams. "Not planned exactly. Hoped for. Humanity spent centuries perfecting weapons, only to realize our greatest achievement was learning when not to use them. The core leadership won't accept this," Argyle rumbled from his position near the door. "Their whole system is built on control. Their elite commanders are already trying to quarantine the affected ships, prevent the spread of this understanding." Too late, Tic Tac chimed in from various speakers throughout the facility. "The quantum entanglement network we established during the battle has already linked every neural implant in the core military. Every soldier, every officer, they're all beginning to see. Z8's mechanical arms moved in complex patterns as they processed incoming data. The effect is spreading beyond the military. Civilian networks are being flooded with unfiltered information. The core's control over perspective is breaking down. James nodded, but his expression remained serious. This is the most dangerous moment. When empires begin to crumble, they often try to take everything with them. The core's highest levels of leadership will have contingencies, weapons we don't know about. As if in response to his words, new alerts flashed across the facility's screens. Z8 sensors extended fully. Multiple quantum signatures detected. The core's supreme command is activating something big. The Void Protocol, one of the converted core officers spoke up, his face pale. It's supposed to be a myth, a last resort. They say it can rewrite reality itself, turn whole sectors of space into null zones where life simply cannot exist. Lizra's ears flattened against her head. Can we stop it? We don't have to, James said quietly. Because humanity already did, 1,000 years ago. He pressed his hand against the central console, and the facility's walls became transparent, revealing the star-filled space around them. Why do you think we chose this moon, this specific location, to hide? The facility's deep scanners activated, revealing layers of reality invisible to normal sensors. The entire region of space around them was enclosed in an intricate web of quantum manipulations, established centuries ago and maintained by systems so advanced they appeared magical. The core didn't create the Void Protocol, Tic Tac explained. They discovered fragments of human technology, weapons we abandoned because they were too dangerous. What they don't know is that we also created safeguards, ways to ensure such weapons could never be used again. The space around them shimmed as the core's supreme weapon activated, and then nothing happened. The quantum web flared briefly, absorbing and neutralizing the reality-destroying energies with quiet efficiency. Humanity's last gift to the galaxy, James continued, watching as the core leadership's final gambit failed. Not the weapons we created, but the protections we put in place against them. We didn't just hide, we became guardians of a better way. And now? Lizra asked, her tail swishing with barely contained emotion. What happens to the rebellion, to everything we fought for? James turned to face her fully, and for the first time, she saw him smile without any trace of sadness. Now you do something harder than fighting. You build. The core's power was based on control and fear, but you have the chance to create something based on understanding and choice. The facility's systems began to reconfigure, transforming from a hidden bunker into something new. Walls shifted, rooms expanded, and ancient technology awakened to serve a different purpose. This place will no longer be a weapons cache, James announced. It's going to be a center of learning, where people from all species can come to understand not just technology, but perspective. The knowledge humanity accumulated, not about how to win wars, but about how to prevent them. And you? Argyle asked. Will you help us build this new future? I'm tired of being seen as a weapon, James replied. But a teacher? That's a role I think humanity could be proud of. He looked around at the gathered beings, former core soldiers, rebellion fighters, and his unlikely crew of friends. We spent centuries learning from our mistakes. Now we can help others avoid them entirely. The facility continued its transformation, and above them, ships from a dozen species began to gather. Not for war, but for something humanity had finally discovered in its last days, the wisdom to know that understanding was stronger than any weapon. High in orbit, reality rippled subtly as ancient quantum safeguards continued their eternal vigil, protecting not just against weapons, but against the temptation to use them. And in the command center, a former weapon of war began his new role, teaching the galaxy not how to fight, but how to grow beyond the need for fighting at all. The last human had awakened not to end a war, but to prevent countless others. And in doing so, he had given the galaxy something far more valuable than victory, he had given them evolution.